Hello, welcome to the Realm Adventure League Alpha 1.0 gameplay video. This is video number 3. We're going to be focused this video on the drafting process. If you haven't seen the first two videos, please check those out. This video is going to be focused on the draft, so let's go ahead and log in. We'll log in and we'll get to the My League screen that we previously talked about, and then we're going to go ahead and get into our actual league. So as we talked about before, this banner shows up because when you actually enter a league, there's a first time window is really focused on setting up your draft. Now, when we talk about draft, for those of you that haven't played a fantasy sports game before, draft is about you setting up your preferences of who you want to be on your team during the drafting process. Now, what draft does is, depending on your position in the draft, when your time is to pick a character, your preference will come up and it'll go pick that character if that character is available, because the characters are unique personalities that are actually going to be part of an individual's team. So that character can't be on multiple teams within your own league. So what ends up happening here is you'll see this window here that basically says the draft picks need to be set up, and then you have 2 days, 1 hour, and 48 minutes before the draft starts. So what the draft does is, at that time, when that timer runs out, you will no longer be able to configure any of the preferences, and then the system in the background will go through each person's pick in a specific order and actually go say, oh, is that character available? Yes, add them to your team. And when it gets done doing that whole process, you'll end up getting your full team. And we'll see that here in a later video when that actually happens. But that's kind of what's happening with draft. One thing I do want to point out that I didn't point out in the earlier videos is we have this how to play section. And this is important because there's a draft. All the stuff I'm going to talk about right now is actually up in here. Is how to play. And this guide is going to be continually built out with a lot of detail. Right now there's only a couple sections in here. If you go to the league section, this tells you the general concept of how the leagues work. But there's a drafting your team article. And inside this article is what I'm basically explaining. Is what's going to happen with your draft mode, what draft position looks like, how the draft works. So that's all here in this video, or on this how to play game guide. So let's go back. Let's go back into our team here specifically. And there's two different ways to see this. I was looking at my actual team window. So I'm going to click on the draft preferences. Now, one thing to explain here that was a little confusing to some people is, as you're walking through configuring this inside the draft mode, it's automatically saving. So each thing that you do is automatically saved. So there is no major save button here that says now save your stuff. It's automatically happening for you, so it makes it a little bit easier. Now, when we talk about draft, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the roles within the game and what order you want to draft those in when it's your turn to draft. And then within that role, who are your characters or your heroes that you want to try to get. Now, in context of fantasy football example, is you'd set up saying I want to draft a quarterback first, and when I go to draft my quarterback, I want Peyton Manning as my first pick. If Peyton Manning's not available, then I'm going to want Cam Newton, right, or Russell Wilson, right? You put them in the order if they're available. So the first thing that you got to look at is you got to see your draft position. Now, when you first start a league, you don't have your draft position until the league is full, and then it sets up your draft position. Now, why does draft position matter? Draft position is the pick that you're going to have overall, and it goes in a sequence of up and down the 10 picks. So if you're the first pick, you will have the very first pick of the entire league. So you're going to pretty much guarantee your very first pick, your very first character you're going to get. What happens then is the second person gets to pick, the third person, and it goes all the way up to 10. When it gets to 10, it reverses order, and the person that picked 10th will pick the 11th pick will be that person's actual next pick, and it starts to go down. So example, if you're in the first position, you'll have the first pick and the 20th pick. If you're in the 10th position, you'll have the 10th pick and the 11th pick, and then it goes up and down until your entire roster is full. So please go read the how-to article. I do a little example there of how that works. And that matters because you got to start thinking about who you're drafting, who you're going to you want to prioritize, etc. within the draft. So in this window, you have the roll draft order screen, which is what we're on currently, and the character order. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the roll draft order. Your roster of your team will be made up of these core roles, which there's actually 6 total roles in the game. They're main tank, off tank, main healer, raid healer. There's 2 melee DPS and 4 range DPS. Now, for those of you who've never played an MMO before, these are kind of terminology that's part of what's called raiding in MMOs. So if you haven't done that before, no worries. It's really just a role in the game that they battle when they're in their guilds. So you have to pick these roles, and then you have this bench down here. And the bench, when you first start up, just says all this pick a role, because you have to decide what roles you want to put on your bench. You can just think of it as having an extra backup type character for that role. So example, back to football would be I would do a quarterback up here, but maybe I wanted a backup quarterback just in case something happened, right? Peyton Manning got hurt or something to that effect. So this allows you to say, I want an extra type of this person or this role, and you set that up. Now this little symbol here, this little question mark, when you first come in here, all these are question marks. That is just setting up your pick, right? So what ends up happening here is if I want the main tank to be my very first pick, I'm going to set it up that when I get to pick my very first time, I'm going to be drafting a main tank. That's what it's going to look for. Then when it goes to do the main tank, it's going to go look at the character order of my main tanks. And it's going to find me the first available character that I wanted and put him in my slot. Okay. So the first thing to be thinking about is, kind of what's your order here going to be, and that's going to be based on the characters themselves and what you're looking for. So you see here, I've done some of that. I've been just kind of goofing around with some of my picks. I haven't finalized it yet, but we'll talk about actual strategy here in a few minutes. You can go to the character order by 2 different ways. You can click on the character order button up here, or you can click the scroll specifically. Now, we don't have all the features connected here that when you click on the main tank scroll, you go over to just main tanks. We're going to be kind of putting some of that filtering in probably at a later date. We just didn't get time to get it in for this current alpha. So let's go look at the character order screen. The character order screen actually has 2 sections to it, top and bottom. This is all the available characters, and then the bottom is your priority. And you'll notice at the bottom says main tank, and you can click through these. This is just a way to filter through the roles so you can look at only those characters at the same time. So given that I said before that I think my first character that I'm going to draft is going to be a main tank, what I'm going to do is go up here and just go ahead and say, okay, for the role that I'm going to look at, let's just look at main tanks so I can see that. Okay, so this is going in here, and this is all about filtering and looking through the characters because there are lots of characters. We're not going to talk on this video about the statistics and all the detail here on the characters. We'll do that in a later video. Right now I'm just kind of showing you how the general drafting system works. So here's an example. I'm the 6th pick. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be the 6th person picking. The first one I want to do is a main tank. Who's going to be available? So these are the, statistically these look like they're pretty good characters. So maybe I'm just going to say, look, if Ninzik's available, I'm going to add him down here. If he's available, I want him to be my first pick. So it's my turn to pick. I want Ninzik. If he's not available, I like Vex, but Vex is kind of performance is or his health and fatigue is going down. So there's a possibility that he'll be benched, and I don't want to mess with him right now because I don't know really what's going on with him. So I'd say, okay, let's go to her. Let's add her. And then let's add her. So I can go add as many characters I want here. Obviously, in the main tank, I'm only going to actually recruit 1 or 2 if I have a bench slot. So I'm never going to get 2 of these characters. But the more you put here, the more options you have, because if somebody's picking before you, they could take that character away, and that character's not available. So if the person in the spot before me, the 5th pick, takes Ninzik, he's not going to be available. So then I would default over to this next character if they're available. So that's how your team ends up on your roster. So this is just setting up your priority order. And again, like we said, you can pick different characters, put them down here. You can remove them. Let's say I don't really want her after I looked at some of her stats. You could kind of reprioritize the order by hitting the buttons here. right? When you click on the character itself, you're going to see this window come up. And this is the character summary. This gives you a little bit more insight into the character themselves. So there's some basic statistics going on there. Their rating experience is really telling you what's their career look like so far, right? What are their stats really based on? He's been around for 3 seasons, and when we say season, it's a 13-week window, and we'll discuss that later in another update. He's been participated in 26 different raids. He's been active about 66.67% of the time. And then last season, he was 92% active. Now, why does that matter? Because active is, if they're active, they're going to generate points. If they're not active and they're benched in their guild, they're not going to generate points. So you got to start thinking about, you know, what's his experience like? Is he going to be more active or not active? Because that's kind of the management you're going to have to do with your team. The league point area here is all about just his league points. What's his average generated? We call it APR, average per raid, that he generates. And what's the highest he's ever scored and the lowest he's ever scored? Now, something to understand in Alpha right now is there's a very wide range of scores for characters. We're working very heavily on the balance of the scoring system and the league points. So some of these points may seem like really out of whack. They're not too bad, but we're still working on it. But this just tells you the general league points that he's generated over that career experience. His league point history shows you the last five battles that he's had. This was all done during the third season that he was battling, and you can see his point system. Like right, so he was at 294, 95, 127, 330, 488. Now, why does this matter? Because the characters themselves, as they're doing performance, can start trends. Because it's not totally random. There's a whole system in the background that's a fate system that's about their performance and how it's happening. So this is really kind of trying to show you the trend. Eventually, this will look like a graph. So you can start to see like he's kind of on an upward trend, right? He was pretty good. He went down a little bit, and then he started to go up, go up, go up. So his performance is on the uptrend. So I'm thinking, well, he's probably going to be pretty good. He's on an uptrend. I kind of like him. At any time, you can actually go to the full character sheet. We won't talk about that in this video. We'll do that later where we go through all the character detail and kind of give you guys some insight of the things that we're working on. So that just gives you an example of that. And really all this is all about is setting up all your priority of your characters, looking at different classes, different guilds, different stats that you want to look at. Say we want to look at just off tanks, right? Do the same thing here. This guy's looking pretty good. I'll take him. And then I'll skip these two because fatigue's not a bad thing. So I keep saying I'm skipping these guys. But fatigue's not a bad thing because they're going to get rested and they're going to come back. That's where you want to start seeing the active and the rested state and all those other things. And we'll talk about how that can be improved and how you can help the characters later. So it's not always bad to have them there if you get them on your team. You're going to inevitably deal with fatigue of characters. Okay. So that's all this is really about. I'm not going to go through too much more detail here, but once you get that set up, you're good to go. I'm going to go back to this window. Now what ends up happening here is you see some check marks over these scrolls, and if you hover, it basically tells you have 3 off tanks picked in your list. So this green check mark just saying that you've actually put a priority here. Let's talk about what happens if you do nothing. Like if you don't go in there and worry about the characters, etc., because you're just like, yeah, I could care less. Just give me some characters. The system will actually default to just picking the characters based on some templates that we have in the background, which usually looks at certain roles in a certain order and then picks some of the best characters that are available at the time. It's very similar to in a fantasy football game. You'd say, just give me the best character available at the time based on whatever model that they deploy, right? So you don't even have to sit here and do all this if you don't want to. But I really like to. I like to say I want my main tank first because I'm the 6th pick. I think the 4 or 5 guys prior to me are going to pick a certain thing. Then I want the next pick to be a certain thing. So I could say I want to go from main tank to my healer to be number 2. I want my raid healer to be number 3. And I'll pick my off tank number 4. Then I'm going to go to melee DPS number 5. I'll pick a range as my 6th pick overall. I'll leave my range as 8. I'll do a 7th pick here. So that's all I'm doing right now is I'm just setting it up. And you can change this all the way up until that timer runs out, right? You can configure all this. And again, we're saving all this in the background. So that's my 10 picks up there. That's the order I want. Then I'll default to picking my main healer as number 11. The roles here, you're going to click here and say I want a melee DPS there, extra. I want an extra ranged there. And one more. Let's do an off healer. Can't. Oh, that's an off tank. I'm gonna change the role. I want an off tank. Oh, not a raid healer. Sorry. All right. So then there I can say 11, 12. I'll do him 13, 14, and 15. So that sets up all 15 of my picks. They're going to happen during the draft. And then at any time you go over, you can start filtering all these and start picking those characters. All right. Okay. So that's what we had to talk about from a drafting perspective. A couple things to remember is these characters are unique. So you're going to end up with them on your team. And if they're on your team, they're not on somebody else's team within your league. They're unique personalities. So they're living and breathing on the realm. And you're kind of trying to figure out their performance and how they're going to do based on the statistics and things like that. Now, we'll talk about influence system and how you can help the characters and improve your chances. But what's going to happen here is the next video we talk about will be after the draft happens. We'll actually come back and look at the team system, the team management, which will look very similar to the structure you saw on the draft window, and how you manage your team. Because inevitably, you're going to set up your picks. You're not going to get exactly what you wanted, and you're going to have to kind of react to, okay, I didn't get exactly what I wanted. I had a good tank. I didn't get the melee DPS I wanted. So then you can start switching out characters, go finding certain characters that didn't get drafted, and be able to have a time window to actually do that before you start going into matchups. And so the next few videos that will be here in the next few days is as we start to progress through the alpha, we move into the team system. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the matchups. But this should get you started. And just to reiterate, don't forget that how to play section will give you more details. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video, and have fun in your league.